Okay, so we're going to read A and P by John Updike. And as always, you should have your textbook open in front of you to page 163. Just a few notes about the story before we begin. A and P is the name of a grocery store. So it's kind of like the title is Publix. Our narrator is Sammy. He's 19 years old. It's a first person point of view. And keep in mind that this story was published in 1961. So it's important to consider in 1961, where was America culturally? The 1950s had been about conformity, uniformity, the Red Scare, and so on. And the 1960s became about rebellion against the establishment, the sexual revolution, the feminist movement, all kinds of radical movements. So I sense that in this story, John Updike really has his finger on the pulse of American culture at the time. So there's kind of one foot still in the 1950s, and that's represented by the store manager named Langle. And then Sammy is a young man, obviously, that is going to grow up as an adult into the 1960s. And so the story's about a lot more than just a grocery store incident. It's a commentary on American culture at that particular point in time. Okay, here we go. In walks these three girls in nothing but bathing suits. I'm in the third checkout slot with my back to the door, so I don't see them until they're over by the bread. The one that caught my eye first was the one in the plaid green two-piece. She was a chunky kid with a good tan and a sweet, broad, soft-looking can, that means ass, with those two crescents of white just under it where the sun never seems to hit, at the top of the backs of her legs. I stood there with my hand on a box of hi-ho crackers, trying to remember if I rang it up or not. I rang it up again, and the customer starts giving me hell. She's one of these cash register watchers, a witch, about 50, with rouge on her cheekbones and no eyebrows, and I know it made her day to trip me up. She had been watching cash registers for 50 years and probably never seen a mistake before. By the time I got her feathers smoothed and her goodies into a bag, she gives me a little snort in passing. If she'd been born at the right time, they would have burned her over in Salem. By the time I get her on her way, the girls had circled round the bread and were coming back, without a pushcart, back my way along the counters in the aisle between the checkouts and the special bins. They didn't even have shoes on. There was this chunky one with the two-piece. It was bright green and the seams on the bra were still sharp and her belly was still pretty pale, so I guess she just got it, the suit. There was this one and with one of those chubby berry faces, the lips all bunched together under her nose. This one and a tall one with black hair that hadn't quite frizzed right, and one of those sunburns right across under the eyes, and a chin that was too long. You know, the kind of girl other girls think is very striking and attractive, but never quite makes it, as they very well know, which is why they like her so much. And then the third one that wasn't quite so tall. She was the queen. She kind of led them, the other two peeking around and making their shoulders round. She didn't look round, not this queen. She just walked straight on slowly on these long, white prima donna legs. She came down a little hard on her heels as if she didn't walk in her bare feet that much, putting down her heels and then letting the weight move along to her toes as if she was testing the floor with every step, putting a little deliberate extra action into it. You never know for sure how girls' minds work. Do you really think it's a mind in there or just like a little buzz like a bee in a glass jar? But you got the idea. She had talked the other two into coming in here with her, and now she was showing them how to do it. Walk slow and hold yourself straight. She had on a kind of dirty pink beige, maybe, I don't know, bathing suit with little nubble all over it. And what got me? The straps were down. They were off her shoulders, looped loose around the cool tops of her arms, and I guess as a result the suit had slipped a little on her, so all around the top of the cloth there was this shining rim. If it hadn't been there, you wouldn't have known there could have been anything whiter than those shoulders. With the straps pushed off, there was nothing between the top of the suit and the top of her head except just her, this clean, bare plane of the top of her chest down from the shoulder bones like a dented sheet of metal tilted in the light. I mean, it was more than pretty. She had sort of oaky hair that the sun and salt had bleached, done up in a bun that was unraveling, and a kind of prim face. Walking into the A&P with your straps down, I suppose it's the only kind of face you can have. She held her head so high, her neck, coming up out of those white shoulders, looked kind of stretched. But I didn't mind. The longer her neck was, the more of her there was. She must have felt in the corner of her eye, me, and over my shoulder Stokesy in the second slot watching, but she didn't tip, not this queen. She kept her eyes moving across the racks and stopped and turned so slow it made my stomach rub the inside of my apron, and buzzed to the other two who kind of huddled against her for relief, and then they all three of them went up the cat dog food breakfast cereal macaroni rice raisins spaghetti soft drink cookies aisle. From the third slot I looked straight up this aisle to the meat counter, and I watched them all the way. The fat one with the tan sort of fumbled with the cookies, but on second thoughts she put the package back. The sheep pushing the carts down the aisle, the girls were walking against the usual traffic, not that we have one-way signs or anything, were pretty hilarious. You could see them when Queenie's white shoulders dawned on them, kind of jerk or hop or hiccup, but their eyes snapped back to their own baskets and on they pushed. I bet you could have set off dynamite in an A&P, and the people would by and large keep reaching and checking oatmeal off their lists and muttering, let me see, there's applesauce or whatever it is they mutter. But there was no doubt this jiggled them. A few house slaves in pin curlers even looked around after pushing their carts past to make sure what they had seen was correct. You know, it's one thing to have a girl in a bathing suit down on the beach, where, what with the glare, nobody can look at each other much anyway, and another thing in the cool of the A&P under the fluorescent lights against all those stacked packages, with her feet padding along naked over our checkerboard green and cream rubber tile floor. "Oh, Daddy," Stokesy said beside me, "I feel so faint." "Darling," I said, "hold me tight." Stokesy's married, with 2 babies chalked up to his fuselage already. But as far as I can tell, that's the only difference. He's 22, and I was 19 this April. "Is it done?" he asks, the responsible married man finding his voice. I forgot to say he thinks he's going to be manager some sunny day in 1990 when it's called the Great Alexandrov and Petrushki Tea Company or something. What he meant was, our town is 5 miles from a beach with a big summer colony out on the point. But we're right in the middle of town, and the women generally put on a shirt or shorts or something before they get out of the car into the street. And anyway, these are usually women with 6 children and varicose veins mapping their legs, and nobody, including them, could care less. As I say, we're right in the middle of town, and if you stand at our front doors, you can see 2 banks, the Congregational Church, the newspaper office, and 3 real estate offices, and about 27 old freeloaders tearing up Central Street because the sewer broke again. It's not as if we're on the Cape. We're north of Boston, and those people in this town haven't seen the ocean for 20 years. The girls had reached the meat counter and were asking McMahon something. He pointed, they pointed, and they shuffled out of sight behind a pyramid of Diet Delight peaches. All that was left for us to see was old McMahon patting his mouth and looking after them, sizing up their joints. Poor kids. I began to feel sorry for them. They couldn't help it. Now, here comes the sad part of the story. At least my family says it's sad, but I don't think it's so sad myself. The store is pretty empty, it being Thursday afternoon, so there's nothing much to do except lean on the register and wait for the girls to show up again. The whole store was like a pinball machine, and I didn't know which tunnel they'd come out of. After a while, they came around out the far aisle, around the light bulbs, records at discount of the Caribbean Six or Tony Martin Sings or some such gunk you wonder they waste the wax on, 6 packs of candy bars and plastic toys done up in cellophane that fall apart when a kid looks at them anyway. Around they come, Queenie still leading the way and holding a little gray jar in her hand. Slots 3 through 7 are unmanned, and I could see her wandering between Stokes and me, but Stokesy, with his usual luck, draws an old party in baggy gray pants who stumbles up with 4 giant cans of pineapple juice. What do these bums do with all that pineapple juice? I've always asked myself. So the girls come to me. Queenie puts down the jar, and I take it into my fingers, icy cold. Kingfish Fancy Herring Snacks in pure sour cream, 49 cents. Now her hands are empty, not a ring or a bracelet, bare as God made them, and I wonder where the money's coming from. Still, with that prim look, she lifts a folded dollar bill out of the hollow at the center of her nubbled pink top. The jar went heavy in my hand. Really, I thought that was so cute. Then everybody's luck begins to run out. L'Engle comes in from haggling with a truck full of cabbages on the lot and is about to scuttle into that door marked manager behind which he hides all day when the girls touch his eye. L'Engle's pretty dreary, teaches Sunday school and the rest, but he doesn't miss that much. He comes over and says, "Girls, this isn't the beach." Queenie blushes, though maybe it's just a brush of sunburn I was noticing for the first time, now that she was so close. My mother asked me to pick up a jar of herring snacks. Her voice kind of startled me, the way voices do when you see the people first, coming out so flat and dumb, yet kind of tony, too, the way it ticked over pickup and snacks. All of a sudden, I slid right down her voice into her living room. Her father and the other men were standing around in ice cream coats and bow ties, and the women were in sandals, picking up herring snacks on toothpicks off a big glass plate, and they were all holding drinks the color of water with olives and sprigs of mint in them. When my parents have somebody over, they get lemonade, and if it's a real racy affair, Schlitz in tall glasses with "They'll do it every time" cartoons stenciled on. "That's all right," Langle said, "but this isn't the beach." His repeating this struck me as funny, as if it had just occurred to him he'd been thinking all these years the A&P was a great big sand dune, and he was the head lifeguard. He didn't like my smiling, as I say he doesn't miss much, but he concentrates on giving the girls that sad Sunday school superintendent stare. Queenie's blush is no sunburn now, and the plump one in plaid that I liked better from the back, really sweet can, pipes up, "We weren't doing any shopping, we just came in for one thing." "That makes no difference," Lingle tells her, and I could see from the way his eyes went that he hadn't noticed she was wearing a two-piece before. "We want you decently dressed when you come in here." "We are decent," Queenie says suddenly, her lower lip pushing, getting sore now that she remembers her place, a place from which the crowd that runs the A&P must look pretty crummy. Fancy herring snacks flashed in her very blue eyes. "Girls, I don't want to argue with you. After this, come in here with your shoulders covered. It's our policy." He turns his back. "That's policy for you. Policy is what the kingpins want. What the others want is juvenile delinquency." All this while, the customers had been showing up with their carts, but you know sheep, seeing a scene, they had all bunched up on Stokesy, who shook open a paper bag as gently as peeling a peach, not wanting to miss a word. I could feel the silence, everybody getting nervous, most of all Langle, who asks me, "Sammy, have you rung up their purchase?" I thought and said no, but it wasn't about that I was thinking. I go through the punches, 4, 9, gross, tote. It's more complicated than you think, and after you do it often enough, it becomes a little song that you hear words to. In my case, hello being there you happy people, splat being the drawer flying out. I uncrease the bill, tenderly, as you may imagine, it having just come from between the two smoothest scoops of vanilla I had ever known were there, and pass a half and a penny into her narrow pink palm, and nestle the herrings in a bag and twist its neck and hand it over, all the time thinking. The girls, and who'd blame them, are in a hurry to get out, so I say, I quit, to Langle. Enough for them to hear, hoping they'll stop and watch me, their unsuspected hero. They keep right on going into the electric eye. The door flies open and they flicker across the lot to their car. Queenie and Plaid and big tall Goonie. Not that as raw material she was so bad, leaving me with Langle and a kink in his eyebrow. Did you say something, Sammy? I said I quit. I thought you did. You didn't have to embarrass them. It was they who were embarrassing us. I started to say something that came out fiddle-dee-doo. It's a saying of my grandmother's, and I know she would have been pleased. I don't think you know what you're saying, Langle said. I know you don't, I said, but I do. I pull the bow at the back of my apron and start shrugging it off my shoulders. A couple customers that had been heading for my slot begin to knock against each other like scared pigs in a chute. Langle sighs and begins to look very patient and old and gray. He's been a friend of my parents for years. Sammy, you don't want to do this to your mom and dad, he tells me. It's true, I don't. But it seems to me that once you begin a gesture, it's fatal not to go through with it. I fold the apron, Sammy, stitched in red on the pocket, and put it on the counter, and drop the bow tie on top of it. The bow tie is theirs, if you've ever wondered. You'll feel this for the rest of your life, Langle says. And I know that's true, too. But remembering how he made that pretty girl blush makes me so scrunchy inside, I punch the no sale tab, and the machine whirs, people, and the drawer splats out. One advantage to this scene taking place in summer, I can follow this up with a clean exit. There's no fumbling around getting your coat and galoshes. I just saunter into the electric eye in my white shirt that my mother ironed the night before, and the door heaves itself open, and outside the sunshine is skating around on the asphalt. I look for my girls, but they're gone, of course. There wasn't anybody but some young married screaming with her children about some candy they didn't get by the door of a powder blue Falcon station wagon. Looking back in the big windows over the bags of peat moss and aluminum lawn furniture stacked on the pavement, I could see Langle in my place in the slot, checking the sheep through. His face was dark gray and his back stiff as if he had just had an injection of iron, and my stomach kind of fell as I felt how hard the world was going to be to me hereafter.